thing my head wasn't down there. As accurately as possible, I've positioned a piece of wooden doweling, basically it's a little broomstick, with a bit of tape on either side to bring up the diameter into the channel that the steering rack is going to eventually end up getting mounted. And cut to the right length, it comes out to the inside portion of the fender. Now, I tried to make some marks with something a little bit similar to this earlier, and I was off. So this is going to hopefully line up the holes on both sides so that they're as accurate as possible. So I'm going to try and use a pencil, pen, whatever, to scribe around the inside of this and see if I can get a mark. Failing that, I will take the broomstick out and drive a little nail into the center portion of it and use that like a punch. It's backed up, it's blocked with wood, but once again, this is a please don't let me screw up situation. Pretty mangled, but it looks like I got it dead center. Hot. Looks sort of about the same. This distance here, I don't know. If it's off just a tiny little bit. I guess I'll find out when I put the rack in. This way first. That looks pretty good. Now all I have to do is clean up the edges and it should be good. Lower A-arm, bushing, slides on the front, no grease. Then I slide the front portion over the bushing and push it back. It's got to fit through here, but it's got to slide over here first. Well, maybe we'll move it up. Yeah, that'll work. That'll get it in position. This is probably just getting past the nylon that is so tough. Well, the washers are still loose. Let's leave it like that for now. The shock also mounts at the same time as the upper suspension piece. I've trimmed it down so that it will fit into the eyelet at the bottom. I have a bolt to hold it, but I have no nuts. Well, actually, I guess these are the same size. Yeah, those will work. All right, so that's fine. I'll slide that in for now, if I can. Okay, the upper A-arms, even though it's not an A at all, it's just a bar, are brand new because they have ball joints in them and they're all sealed up. I think these are off of a Triumph Herald or something bizarre. And they have left side and right side, and this is a left hand. So It fits, hopefully, in here at the top. And in order to prevent it from scraping up this aluminum, I'm going to get a piece of cardboard because it has to slide in very close to the body. Now that may be the reason why I haven't used washers in the past, because the bolts aren't long enough. So I'm going to pop this out and ditch the washer. If I can get access to the back. Much better. No washer. Now, before I can do the sway bar, I need to do the other side. But I might as well put the kingpin on this side. Let's take the nut off the top here and put that in position and help hold this thing up. Well, maybe not. Maybe we'll just try a little bit of extra force. I'm going to take this pin and shave it down a little bit. Well, I learned something. That pin is made out of incredibly tough stuff. So it's tight, but it's going to scrape a little bit of the powder coating off, but it won't be seen. Okay, in with the nut, bolt. Yeah, there should be room for a washer. Now we'll just position the top. Put the nut on for now to hold that all in place, and that gives us half a suspension. One thing I forgot to mention on the other side is that this adjuster should be facing down. Makes it easier to get at. Now, like the other side, I'm going to have to, well, maybe not. It's fitting into position. The anti-sway bar goes in through this hole, through these two rubber bushings. So I'm just going to place them in there for now, put them in on the other side as well. Then the sway bar end fits through and out the other side and attaches to two blocks at the front. Slip it in both sides. No problem. And we'll tighten them up in a minute. Brakes, calipers. Well, the discs have to go on first before the calipers can go on. The discs have been repacked, just keeping all of the stuff inside the dust cap for now. Probably all go on in one smooth motion. And I have double checked the torques on all of these plates. Now, I'm not going to tighten these up yet as well. So I'm just going to leave the dust caps off. This is just so that I can get the calipers on. Ugh, grease. This one, the disc got a little water on it or something, so it's got a little rust spot. but it's gonna all vanish the first time the brakes are applied. And there are no cotter pins yet as well. Now we don't tighten these things up too much. Just enough to get it to the next cotter pin hole, which I think is right there. If there's any trick to remember about the calipers is that they have to go on the right side. And the absolute way to make sure of that is to check to see if the bleed nipple is up. Obviously, if the bleed nipple is down, then you're going to be pushing air down and it's going to form a pocket. That particular procedure drove me absolutely crazy one summer trying to bleed the brakes on an old Triumph TR3. So we'll just slide them into position. And since I've already punched a hole in the frame or the body, I can push this through for the inside brake line. With the hose in place, I'm going to make sure that I have full range of motion without it binding or catching. Now it's never going to go over that far because it's going to bang against things. Same thing here. So we're good. We've got it looped up and out of the way so it doesn't kink. I went ahead and I put the fuel pump back in, and that allowed me to put the wheels and tires on it. So for the first time in a long time, it's starting to look like a real vehicle. There are still some fundamental differences though. I'm not too sure if this is what they're referring to when they talk about independent front suspension. There's no steering rack right now. There's no radiator because those two have to go in the right order. So I think the engine is probably the next thing to pre-assemble and get ready. First thing I'm going to do is install the jack shaft, or the shaft that would have normally been used for the push rods, but in this case the only thing it drives now is the distributor. I've got one plate here in the back that I have to install before the crankshaft goes in, but I'm going to get these bearings out of the way so that they don't get damaged. Well, that's not supposed to happen, and neither is that. And here's the jack shaft. So we're going to oil it up and slide it in from the front. Have to try to be very careful not to nick the bearings in this process. All three bearings are exactly the same size, so it has to make the route through one bearing 3 times, next bearing twice, and the last bearing once. So you have risk of damage. Okay, I've just put the gear on the front so that I can actually spin it. There's a retainer that will fit in place. This is the first little gasket, and it's going to be installed right back here. There's always the curse of the rear engine oil seal leak. So I've added a reasonable amount of gasket cement, hopefully not an overly excessive amount. And I'm just going to add some more to the other side. This wonderful thing that looks like a piece of licorice is actually the rear engine oil seal. And I'm going to pack it with a little bit of silicone or gasket cement, and then push it in with a little bit on one side proud, a little bit on the other side. I'm going to let the crankshaft actually push it down so that it will seat appropriately. then that's the only thing that's keeping the oil in the engine. Okay, the journals are oiled up. The crank has been blown off and cleaned. And now we'll just very carefully, not drop it, place it into the block. Then, with the thrust washers oiled up, with the oil groove out, I'm going to place one on one side of the center main and the other with a little bit of oil on the other side of the center main. This is very important that the oil grooves be out, not the other way around. I destroyed, well, at least with the help of another major British automobile manufacturer, another engine that I bought as a short block, and these thrust washers were put in backwards. And needless to say, the engine didn't last very long. All of the mains have been plastic gauged already. So we're just going to put a little bit of oil on them, try to keep it from the webbing in the block. You don't want to squeeze oil in there. And then position them. We have a little trick that we have to perform on the center main to ensure that they are all centered. Okay, so now we'll torque them to spec. 55 to 60 is what the factory shop manual says, but we're going to go up in stages. So I'm going to go to 30 on the center and then work my way out the same way as I would with a head bolt pattern, and the final to 60. Okay, do another little test. That's good. Okay, I'm going to leave the throws in this up and down position to make it easier to put the pistons in. The bearings haven't been installed in the pistons as yet. I put the rings on, or had the machine shop put the rings on, and then I put the rods on the pistons. Now, the rings have to be positioned so that they don't all line up at the same location. So we're putting the oil groove for number 1 over here, and the oil groove for number 2 over on this side. The oil ring has a gap as well, and so we're going to move the oil ring gap around. There's one there, and there's one there. So that way it will, there's never any chance of a leak in compression, because even though they're tiny little gaps, they still are gaps. So now we're going to put the ring compressor on this and insert it into the block. Position this one. Just slide into where the rings stop it. Now we'll attach the ring compressor. Tighten everything up. Now it should just pop down with a little bit of assistance, and the throw for this one is positioned to the bottom right now, so it's not going to hit anything. Perfect. Okay. That's piston number 1, and they are marked. So the mark for 1 is over here on this side. We're going to position the bearing cap with a bearing, which always comes in handy, with a little bit of oil, and then finger tight torque this one. And those are 44 to 46. 44. There we go. Let's try something, see if this will actually turn. It's a tight one. I'm gonna do number 4 next, seeing as it's same situation, it's down. I goofed. This cap belongs on this piston. I wonder I couldn't find it. So hopefully we haven't done any damage. Maybe that was one of the reasons why it wasn't going to turn. But at least I discovered it before anything major happened. I purchased another Lotus engined car, Cortina, years ago. And the 2 of the pistons were in backwards. But oddly enough, after I rebuilt it, it didn't perform quite as well as it did when the pistons were in the wrong way around. Okay, so that goes over here. And the bearing is in place. "44. 44. Let's see if this will turn now. Yes, much better. I hate making mistakes. See if we've got a bottom end. It's moving, but it's my hands are so greasy I have nothing to grab onto. Yeah, we're okay. There's one thin gasket that fits between the front cover and the block, and it's got a hole here to allow this oil gallery to lubricate the front sprocket. So I have to make sure that when I apply the silicone that I don't block this or the channel in the front cover that moves the oil across. So I just smear this around a bit. Oh, I'm using that wrong finger again. So this one is just held on by one bolt for now until I get the other bolts in position. I'm going to position one other bolt over here just to make sure this thing lines up before I torque it down. Before I get carried away and put the front cover on, I better make sure I put the woodruff key and the front sprocket back on the crankshaft. I also have to make sure that this goes on the right way around. And we'll have to coax the key down a little bit. Okay, that's bottomed out on the crank, and the 2 gears teeth are lined up now. Camshaft gears on. It's always a good idea to put the oil slinger back on, and it fits this way around. Doesn't make sense to do an engine repair without putting in a new timing chain. The other thing is to make sure that the clip, because if it isn't a universal endless chain, you want the clip to go in the direction of the engine rotation so that it doesn't end up getting pushed off and you have a chain gathered in the bottom of your sump. Just going to drape the chain over this hammer handle and let it drop down below. I'll be able to pick it up and collect it once the cover's on and in position. At least this way, I can pretty much be assured that I won't pinch it. I'm going to run a nice substantial bead of this clear silicone around the front cover. It's not going to squeeze out, it's not going to be black, it's going to look reasonably good. And then we're going to also put a little bit in the water pump hole. This I will smear around with my finger. The water pump has a rubber O-ring, but I think it would probably be prudent to give it a little bit of help. This is an area that could be prone to leaking. Now, very carefully, we'll put the cover on, pull the chain out of the way, and then we'll squeeze the water pump together. Make sure the chain is free, which it is. And now we've got some bolts to go in the bottom. And that one goes through. This one goes into the block on this side. These ones on the top are held in place with nylock nuts on the opposite side. Okay, we'll double check all the torque settings, and then we can flip it over and put the oil pan on it.